What's up? Hello, everybody, and welcome to Architecting with Next.js. I am so excited to be with you today. My name is Cassidy Williams. This is my cool little title card here. I'm Director of Developer Experience at Netlify, and I'm very excited to have you here. Our first talk is actually going to be a fireside chat. We have Salma Alam-Naylor from Contentful, and we're going to be chatting about building with Next.js. It's going to be a nice little fireside chat to get this going. And I think we're ready to go. So, Salma, whoa, there she is. Hello.
Hello, everybody from around the world. Hello, Cassidy. How are you?
I am great. How are you today? I love your lighting.
Thank you. Don't get black walls though. If you're ever thinking about getting black walls and you want fancy lighting, it doesn't work like yours, does it? With the nice white
It
walls.
It's very tough. Yeah, I painted the white walls. I was really tempted to go black walls because it seems like you could be a cool
It's
hacker.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Not cool for this. Not cool for this. But we're dealing with it. My light is on fire mode. I've got fire lights up here
ooh,
because we're by the fire.
fireside chat. I should probably set mine to red. I'll do that later. It's fine. But anyway, so for people who don't know who you are, could you give us a little introduction to your streaming, your work at Contentful, and your experience with Next?
So I'm a developer advocate for Contentful. If you've seen me on the internet before, you might know me as White Panther or White P4N3R if you use a screen reader. I have tried ways to make the screen reader not read that out like that, but I'm still working on that.
Yeah.
I started streaming tech on Twitch last June. And actually I've pretty much built a million projects with Next.js since. Every time I need a new project, let's just spin it up, npx create next app, and we're away. So if you've seen my streams, you know that that's just what I default to because it's just so enjoyable and easy. And the amount of times I have been able to start a stream from nothing, and then in 3 hours, I've built something and it's live.
Mhm.
On your hosting provider of choice, it's just so easy to just get it out there. And it's a joy to use, really, because it takes a lot of the pain away of traditional big website. I mean, you couldn't be doing this like 10 years ago, really, could you? Like the
No.
ease of new projects and the ease of just getting something out there as prototypes or MVPs or fully fledged projects is just pretty sweet.
Yeah, I always like to say the key to like a good dev experience is kind of that time to hello world. How fast can you get up and running to make something real? And yeah, with Next, it's a command. It's a click of a button. It's really, really quick.
I also feel that Next.js has taught me a lot about the modern web and
Mm,
how to be a broader developer. So I specialize in front end development. I used to think that the back end and serverless stuff was just out of my brain space. But the fact that Next.js brings that stuff in with it, with the serverless functions and that kind of infrastructure, and all the different the easy way you can do different routes just with in the pages folder. And it's just, I don't need to worry about any of that stuff anymore. It's just there. But also, without having to worry about it, you kind of give yourself a bit of a teaching, you get teaching points every time a new
yeah.
feature comes out, or something new has been improved.
Right, and I love that it's very backwards compatible. Ooh, my voice cracked, puberty. But yeah, it's very, very backwards compatible where whenever you do update and stuff, your code won't break. You have an opportunity to have that learning experience and
It was
make it
actually a
go better
joy
for you, but yeah.
when Next 11 came out and I updated all of my projects to Next 11. It just worked and it was beautiful. And the
Yeah.
information they give you actually in the terminal when, oh, you're using Webpack 5 now by default, or you're not doing this, you're not doing that. I think it gives you a lot of context.
Mhm.
One of the worst ways to develop in my experience is, oh, just do it like this and you don't need to know why, or you don't need to know how
Right.
it works. But actually, Next kind of tells you how it works as part of the developer experience, which I think is quite fascinating. I just learned so much about the web, even. through learning how to build with Next.js.
Yeah, it's so great when frameworks do have that context in the code for you and in the error messages or in the terminal and stuff. That was something that when I first tried Vue, I was really impressed with, where when I messed something up, the errors were so explicit that I was able to learn what I did wrong and move on without even having to consult the docs and stuff. And that's something that I think a lot of developers don't think of. They just kind of roll with it, build and hope that people can go to the docs or figure it out on their own. But if you're explicit about that, people are more productive because they learn faster
Mhm.
and move
Yes,
forward faster.
it does make you extremely productive. And the fact that you can, the whole no config thing, you can
Mm,
just create a new Next app and be away. You don't have to configure anything if you're not going to use Next image or whatever like that. You can just, without any config, you can deploy. And I think
right.
that's powerful too, because I think there's a lot of times as a developer building with other things, especially maybe with, I know people are kind of wondering how Next compares to Gatsby. When you have
Mm,
a lot of config with Gatsby, if you want to build what you normally build on a website, and with Next there isn't that.
right. Yeah. Well, let's get into that a little bit because have you built a bunch with Gatsby before? I admit I've only done a little bit. I
I've
didn't
got
get
one
super into it.
site that's in production that I haven't really touched since last August for a year.
Yeah, well, that sounds about right. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because I think what what really clicked with me for Next is that I could have something like Gatsby where it did generate a mostly static site for me and stuff, but the learning curve was so much easier,
Hmm.
which was really, really nice. And there's definitely pros and cons to both frameworks.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously, we were talking, I think, the other day about how there's a huge community around Gatsby and a huge
Mhm.
ecosystem that isn't quite there with Next yet.
Right.
But the way it's going, I see that happening. And Next are, with the new features that Next are releasing, I think there could be an ecosystem for those kind of Next endorsed plugins, if you know what I mean. But then
Mhm.
that could also means it goes down the same route as Gatsby. So maybe
Right. And
maybe it's
again,
not a good idea.
pros and cons, yeah, because the Gatsby plugin ecosystem is incredible. The fact that I could say, "I wanna have all of my Instagram photos loaded on this page, do this, do that," and just, like, run a command and the plugin is done, that is awesome. But there's also an element of it being a black box too with that, where with
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Next, I don't necessarily have that, but when I build it, I know I've built it, it works the way I expect it to, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, I saw in the chat Ashlyn posted in there. I'm going to repeat it again. If you have any questions, you can keep chatting in the chat. I'm keeping an eye on it. But if you post in the Q&A tab, which is up there-ish, I don't know what direction I'm facing. Anyway, if you go in the Q&A tab, we'll try to answer all the questions that you might have around Next. Um, but anyway, yeah, I do think with Gatsby and Next, again, pros and cons to both. And what I liked what you said earlier, where you talked about all the different things that you've learned in terms of like serverless functions and things that aren't traditionally front end tasks. It's the kind of thing where I think what is great about it is it allows us to write as if we are front end developers within our comfort zone, but expand what we can do with that skill set.
Absolutely. And I think it pushes you to learn more because those features and functionality are baked into the front end. You know how the
Mhm.
API folder is in the pages folder. So you're forced to look at it and wonder what you can do with it rather than being
Right.
completely somewhere else. It's probably not intentional, but it's clever because you see it
Mhm.
and you wonder what you can do with it. And um, I feel like what we were talking about the other day about the being a T-shaped developer, as
Mm.
you mature and as you have more experience, it's not just about learning more in that discipline. It's about finding other things from other areas of other disciplines and how you can work them into what you do now. And I know I've experimented when I've been streaming with like full back end stuff. For some reason, I started learning Rust on stream because all the cool
Whoa.
kids were doing that.
Yeah,
But
it's so trendy.
it's not
Uh,
my bag. And, and my bag, if you're a front end developer, stick to front end development and really excel in that, but also use these tools that these frameworks give you to just get a really good overview of what's possible. Like, so much is possible with front end
mhm.
development that people don't realize. And there's that crossover that's happening between, you know, is it full stack, but is it just understanding the web?
Yeah.
It's an interesting conversation.
The web, yeah, it's I love the phrase T-shaped developers too, and for those who haven't heard that phrase, it's kind of, a broad amount of information, but you go in depth on something, so it's a T, the shape of a T. And I think a lot of people who come into Next or who use React or who are experimenting just with various web technologies, we tend to be that T shape where we do focus on the front end side of things, but being enabled to be more T-shaped where you are able to touch a lot of different aspects and the different spectrums of the chat is very, very cool. So, what I would like to talk about too is kind of all the different ways that you can get data in Next.js,
Hmm.
because that's something that I get a ton of questions about, and it's both a blessing and a curse that it's incredibly flexible with how you can get data.
Yes. I This is one of my favorite things about Next.js, actually, because I think a lot of people, when they hear of this front end static site framework, you think, oh, you've just got to get your data at build time using get static props and your site is static. But that is just the
Mhm.
beginning. So one of my favorite things that recently, it was probably came out in the last year, was the incremental static regeneration, which
Mm.
gives you the ability to rebuild your site statically, but based on whether the data is still up to date. And I just think it's absolutely magic. I actually have a
Yeah.
YouTube video where I first discovered like the real use for this on stream. And it was just, I was getting data from the GitHub API. And my site was statically generated. This project's page was statically generated, but somebody started a GitHub project and there it updated when I refreshed the page. And that's really, really clever. And
Mhm.
what's also interesting is that it technically ISR is a serverless function. So it's not this
Right.
whole new concept. It's happening on the server as a serverless function. And it's kind of it's magic, but it's if you know how it works, it's not really magic. It's just great. And then you've got the get server side props, which will build the page on the server based on the data that's coming in, and then delivers that to the browser. So you don't get that flash of client side content loading in. You don't have to use skeleton loaders
I
and
think it's
things.
called a FOOC, like flash of unstyled
Unstyled
content or
content.
something.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But then you can, even if it's relevant, still get that data on the client side using React hooks. And so those 4 ways of data in your Next.js pages are so flexible considering if you consider how up to date that data needs to be. And I always use an e-commerce site as an example, because on an
That's a good
e-commerce
one.
site has so many different data points for so many different reasons. And so if you have a static content marketing page, just use get static props and have a nice static bit of data, and get your content from a CMS such as Contentful and build it at build time. If you need a user to be logged in and authenticated, use get server side props to check the authentication of a cookie on a server somewhere. You can use ISR if something's going to change, like a stock level, but it might not be incredibly important for it to be exactly up to date. Or you could get that on the client side. And I think it's Next.js for these kind of applications is a big shift of thinking. There's not just one
Mhm.
way to do this. And I think you can be really, really clever with how you optimize the speed of your application by which data fetching method you choose.
Right, and because you have that flexibility, you can kind of discern when should I do this, when should I do that, and still have the best performance for what
Yes,
you're trying to
yes.
build.
And it's about getting that good performance and understanding how to get that. And again, that teaches you. If you are aware of all these different data fetching methods and why you would use them, you are automatically more informed. And more educated about why it's important and why it's important to have static data if you can have static data, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and so speaking on performance, I'd like to touch on it, but not go too deep because we have a talk that later on that's getting on it. There are some performance benefits and some performance pitfalls when it comes to Next. Have you run into any in particular that haven't been so fun?
Yeah, it's interesting because I gave a talk a few months ago called "How to Prevent the Collapse of Society by Building an Accessible Web." And
Love it.
one of the key points of that talk was that the average internet speed in the world is pretty much the slow 3G emulated speed in
Yeah.
Chrome. And the bundle size of Next.js when you have JavaScript enabled in your browser is
Whew,
pretty
it's
big. It's like
pretty big.
4 megs uncompressed for my homepage of my blog. And
Yeah.
but the good thing is, you turn JavaScript off, the site still works. You still get that data, and you don't get that huge bundle. But most people do surf the web. No one says surf anymore, do they? Most people do
Let's
browse,
bring it back.
browse the web with
Hey
JavaScript
kids, we're
enabled.
surfing today.
And so
Anyway.
the amount of data, the amount of JavaScript you're downloading for a static site is quite a lot.
Yeah.
And yes, it's chunked. And yes, over HTTP2, you get these chunks served. So it's not going to block the page. The page is still fast, right? But there are some concerns about actually with other frameworks that are coming out that are static, and they are serving just HTML. Because actually,
Right.
does it need to be JavaScript? I've got just a plain HTML page of an article
Mhm.
list. Does it need to have JavaScript in it?
Right. Yeah, no, for example, I've been playing with Astro a lot lately, and Astro has been pretty cool because it defaults to no JavaScript, and then you add JavaScript as needed, and it definitely isn't as mature as Next yet. There's some nice little things, but when you compare that final bundle size and stuff, you're just like, "Ooh, that is something that
Mm.
I do wish Next was a little bit better at."
And actually, with things like Next Image, where optimization and speed and browser experience is key to how Next Image is developed, with preventing cumulative layout shift, lazy loading the images as you
Mhm.
scroll down the page so you don't download that image until you see it. That is a big, web performance and experience for the viewer is very important to the framework. So that is an interesting thing at the moment that seems to potentially contradict with that.
Right. Yeah. So pros and cons for all the things. Now, I want to start touching on questions because we have many. And so
Oh,
hopefully we can get to
oh,
a
I didn't
bunch of
even
them.
see how many we had. My gosh.
We have many. Yes, it's very exciting. And so this top one, this is going to be, I know the answer is probably going to be it depends.
Mm-hmm.
But what are the best design patterns for Next?
I can't answer that because it all depends on your
It
project
depends.
and your
Yeah.
requirements. I mean,
Yeah.
get your data, build as many static things as you can using pages. I like to break up my components into small components as possible, and I try to avoid using React use effect and things like that, just so it's as plain sailing as possible. But I guess the design patterns are a whole other fireside chat.
Yeah, we could have an entire chat on that for sure. I do like though saying like as static as possible because you can always bring in data as needed, but if you start with static, that's where the performance benefits really start to
Exactly.
shine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what it's for, isn't it?
Yeah. The next one, Angelo asks, I'm new to Next.js. Could you share some resources to start learning? So I'm going to do a quick shameless plug. There's a website, Jamstack Explorers, and I can drop a link in the chat to that, but I have a free Next.js course on there if you'd like to start there. But
Another
Selma, I'm sure
shameless
you have
plug.
plenty too. Yeah.
Well, my latest YouTube video is a fresh setup of a Next.js app tutorial using the Spotify API, going through all of the setup and all of the reasons why you would do this and that and stuff. It's on my YouTube channel, and I'm quite proud of that video.
You should be. It's excellent. I've only started it, but it's great. Cool. Let's see. What is your preferred way to style a Next.js website?
Personally, CSS modules, because it comes bundled with
Yes.
Next and you don't need anything else. It just works.
I
Why
love
not?
CSS modules.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely like kind of a snooty purist when it comes to CSS and stuff, and I don't like doing CSS and JS as much. I really like having it in its own separate
It's just
file. And
CSS. So I've actually had a lot of experience with styled components in Next apps at scale when I was actually an engineer before I worked in DevRel. I've also used styled components with Gatsby. I've also tried to use Tailwind so many times,
so many times. That learning
but
curve.
but I rage at it always. No offense to it, but it's just not for me. I just like plain CSS. And even when I'm using CSS modules, I prefer to use BEM syntax as well, because it's just so
Mm.
self-documenting. I've got a YouTube video about that as well. And, it's just why add extra stuff into your dependencies when CSS modules comes with it?
Right. I love using CSS modules. What I have tried is Bulma, which I found is similar to Tailwind, but a much lower barrier to entry, at least for me. That it's a nice little utility library, and getting that for just for the grid and some of its base components, and then CSS modules to do everything else has been really, really nice.
Nice. I haven't actually tried Bulma. I will
Yeah,
take a
it's
look.
nice and simple. Like, if you import it in your app.js, that's all you need, and it works across your
Sweet.
app. Yeah. Let's see, this one from Mike. How do you feel about React leading Next by the nose? If React does something negative to the simplicity of Next, etc. This gets a little spicy.
I don't think I've thought about it enough to have feelings. But
It
it's interesting. Next does rely on React, doesn't it?
Right.
Being stable and good.
Right. Well, and I do appreciate, like, React has slowed down, but I think in a good way in terms of what it updates. Like React 17, when it came out, it was literally no code changes needed, no new features. And with Next 18 coming out, like the the changes coming to Next 18 are not
React
going
18.
to or React 18. Sorry. Oh my gosh. Thank you. Next 18 is a long way out.
10 years away.
Yeah, but for React 18, that's going to affect library authors more than it does affect us as individual developers. Like you can dabble with some of it, but it's definitely more for the library authors. Um, I say this as a member of the React 18 working group. I'm not just pulling this out of my butt. So that being said, I think it's a good thing that Next is working with the React team. Like, members of their core team are working with the React team to make sure things are relatively stable. That's just what happens. There are so many frameworks out there in the world that are dependent on other ones, and who knows, maybe there will be a fork someday, and that's those kinds of things could happen. But I don't think we as developers have to worry about that anytime soon, at least. Let's see.
Interesting.
Yeah. We don't have a ton of time left, so we'll maybe one or two questions left. Let's see. I always thought of Next.js as a tool for developing server-side rendered pages. Can it be an ideal tool for making more of a dynamic web page, something like an admin panel or a real-time dashboard? Heck yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yes.
have a real-time dashboard on my blog website for all my numbers and stats built with Next.js using a serverless function to hit the YouTube, GitHub, Twitter API, etc., and then use a really nice React hook by Vercel called use SWR, which is
Mm.
inspired by the stale while revalidate. You don't have to refresh the page, but when new data comes in, when you focus on the page, it updates it. Absolutely perfect example. If you go to whitepanther.com/dashboard, you can see it in action.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many real-time databases and stuff too that you could integrate, whether you're using Firebase, Supabase, any of these other ones that have the
Airtable,
real-time feature.
yeah.
Yeah, Airtable. You can do that. Even like Google Sheets lets you do this
Mm.
kind of real-time
Hmm.
stuff. And so that is a long answer to say yes, you can do all of these things.
Yes. And you should do them if you want.
Yeah, yeah. Um, let's see. Oh, we've got a very quick time. Have you ever worked with Nuxt? This is a fast one. Nuxt is to Vue as Next is to React, and
And
so
I have not worked with it myself.
they're different, but they're friends.
Mm.
That's a very fast answer to that. And Selma, I'll ask you one last question, which comes from the audience as well. What is your favorite project that you've built with Next so far?
Probably women who stream.tech,
Ooh,
but it's still in alpha and very broken,
nice.
because, and I'm actually writing a talk about this as well, about scaling serverless on the Jamstack with no budget and resources and stuff, because this is connected to the Twitch API. And
Mm,
you are rate
that can be
limited on
tough
the
to
Twitch
use.
API,
Yeah,
and serverless functions can't handle, ISR can't handle rate limiting because it's got a timeout of 10 seconds. So it's my
yeah,
favorite project because highlighting women who stream tech, but also because there are many, many fun problems to solve that will result in some hopefully good content for the community. I still haven't solved it yet, but I got my community on it, and I'll be streaming that again soon, actually. But it's solving many problems, and it's exciting because, again, it's about stretching the limits of the Jamstack and getting
yeah.
data in all these different ways. And it's a beast, but it's going to be finished soon.
Great. Yeah, I would say if I were to answer that one, probably I did a choose your own adventure application in Next, and so it uses X state to create this giant state machine where like you can choose your route in this story. I made it for Halloween, so it's a
Mm,
spooky story, and it uses dynamic routes in Next to pull in things. It uses a database and it uses serverless functions to pull in data and populate the story with characters that users can add to the
I love
story.
it.
It was very, very fun to play with, and so I can share the link to that a little bit
And
later.
again, that sounds like a project that requires dynamic data and things, and it's not just
Yeah,
statically generated, which answers the question before as well. You can make a kind of a game with Next.js. You can do whatever you want.
exactly. Yeah, and you can call your data at so many different points in your application depending on what you wanna use it for.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Salma, thank you so much for your time today. It's been so lovely chatting with you, and please drop any links in the chat that people can find you at. I know people have been
Thank you.
sharing your Twitch, but I'd
Thank
love
you.
to see more.
Had a wonderful time. Thank you. And just my final thoughts are build stuff, learn things, and love what you do
Love
whenever
that.
you want. It's on the t-shirt.
Oh, look at that!
Look at
Is that
that.
a T-shirt with a white panther on it?
Yes, it is. It's official. It's a bit awkward. It's official. There you go. There's my panther. There you go.
That's awesome.
Gotta do the
Yeah,
shameless
yeah,
plugging.
you gotta do take advantage of this time. Cool, thank you again, Selma.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. See you all very soon.
Bye.